Okay, let's dive in. We're looking at some really interesting excerpts today from a story called Laramie, or The Queen of Bedlam. It was written back in 1889 by Captain Charles King.
Yeah, and King was actually U.S. Army, so he knew the life. The story sets during the Sioux War 76 at an Army post called Laramie, probably Fort Laramie.
Right, and what's great about these pieces is they give us more than just the military side. It's like the whole social scene of a frontier post. Not just fighting, but personalities, relationships,
hmm
secrets.
Definitely. So our mission here is to unpack all that. We'll use these excerpts to figure out who's who, what's going on with these strange events, and, well, how things like gossip and personal problems all get tangled up.
Yeah, because it seems like everything connects. You've got this unhappy doctor, weird noises in the night, things getting stolen, a young officer in debt.
And this woman everyone's talking about, it's a real web. We'll see how suspicion kind of lands in weird places, and the truth, well, it's not always obvious.
Okay, let's start with setting the scene and maybe talk about this doctor first. Dr. Bayard.
Right, Dr. Bayard. The story tells us straight off he feels like he's come down in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Used to have nice posts, society life, Old Point Comfort, Newport.
Ah, so he's used to the good life. But now he's older, lost his connections maybe, and he's stuck out on the frontier at Laramie.
Exactly, and he hates it. Calls it the barbaric wilds, a mill. He's just deeply resentful about being there. That bitterness is key, I think.
And it spills over into his family life, doesn't it? His daughter, Eleanor Nellie, she's with him.
Yeah, but not out of fatherly affection,
Yeah.
really. It sounds more like revenge. He took her from her grandparents, her deceased mother's parents, because the grandfather, who had political clout, wouldn't get him reassigned.
Wow, that's cold, using his daughter like that.
It tells you a lot about him right away. Manipulative, self-centered.
And poor Eleanor, how does she see it?
Well, initially, she's totally devoted, thinks he's a hero. He's proud of her. It's sad to leave her grandparents, sure. But the text says she was blissful about joining him, going to the army.
So she has no idea about his real motives. The grandparents couldn't warn her.
Apparently not. It's this real contrast, her idealized view versus his bitterness.
And the post itself doesn't help his mood, right? Things change there.
No, it gets worse for him. It was crowded, but then the Sioux War heats up in 76. Most of the troops, cavalry and infantry, get sent north,
Leaving Bayard behind.
leaving Bayard behind with duties he thinks are beneath him, caring for the families left behind, hardly any hospital staff, no assistant doctor. He's stuck.
And that just fuels his resentment.
Totally. He hates the unrefined stuff, the sickness. The source says his sensitive and selfish nature just shrinks from it all. He feels like the world is conspiring to annoy and humiliate him.
So he's just stewing in this self-pity. Creates a tense atmosphere, I bet.
Definitely. And that tension is like the perfect backdrop for weird stuff to start happening.
Which brings us to the first really strange incident. It involves a young lieutenant, Mr. McLean.
That's right, Mr. McLean. He lives in a building they call Bedlam.
Bedlam. Okay, that name alone tells you something.
Kind of hints at chaos, maybe. So McLean comes back to his quarters one evening, just after dusk. He expects the lamps to be on, but the hall's dark.
Okay.
But then he gets to his own room. The lamp there is turned up bright, and his desk, which he knows he left locked, is wide open.
That's unsettling. What does he do?
He steps back into his room, feels a draft, sees the curtain between his rooms, the portiere kind of bulging. He strikes a match in his dark bedroom
Yeah.
and sees the door to the hall, the one he always locks, is slightly open. Ajar.
Creepy. Does he hear anything?
Oh, yeah. As he moves toward that hall door, he hears footsteps. Slippered footfalls, it says. Quick, stealthy, almost noiseless, going up the stairs and out onto the veranda.
His footsteps.
No, and this is the detail that really gets him. It says, what stunned him was the fact that with the footfalls went the swish of dainty silken skirts.
A woman in silk skirts sneaking out of his room.
Exactly. Definitely a woman, based on that sound.
What about his stuff? Did she steal anything?
Only small things. Some stamps, maybe $5 in cash. But his sleeve buttons, a scarf pin. More valuable stuff untouched.
So maybe interrupted. Or looking for something specific, not valuable.
Could be. It mentions letters and notes in his desk look like they'd been gone through.
And where was he coming from again?
He was just popping back from Mrs. Miller's place. He was supposed to grab his scrapbook, photos, autographs, clippings, that kind of thing. Mrs. Miller wanted to show it to Nellie Bayard.
Ah, Nellie again. So he was expected back quickly.
Right. And he's late getting back to the party, like 15 minutes late. Everyone notices, asks questions. Mrs. Miller says he looks pale. asks if he saw a ghost.
What does he say? Does he mention the swishing skirts?
No, he's vague.
Yeah.
Says he ran into something outside near his quarters, something too tangible for a ghost, scurrying off toward Gordon's place. So he called out, got no answer.
And when the major suggests it was maybe a soldier visiting a sweetheart.
McLean just lets that stand. He doesn't mention the skirts. That silence is interesting, isn't it?
Very. So this throws a real curveball into the post-life. A mystery woman sneaking around Bedlam.
Yeah, and it's bound to connect with the social scene, the gossip.
Which leads us to Fanny Forrest, Miss Forrest. She becomes a big focus,
A
right?
huge focus. She's described as really beautiful, tall, stately. But there's a catch.
What's that?
A hardness of expression, a defiant air, and this contrast seems to be what gets the other Garrison ladies talking.
So they're jealous of her looks, but pick on her expression.
Pretty much. The text says they envied her beauty but made comments, speculated about her. She attracts all manner of conjectures. She's immediately an outsider under the microscope. Shows how fast judgments happen in these places.
And we see this social world in action.
We do. The ladies are gathering, strolling, Mrs. Gordon, Mrs. Miller, waiting for the younger women like Nellie.
And then Mr. Holmes shows up.
Yes, Mr. Holmes. His arrival causes quite a stir. He's wealthy, owns a cattle range nearby. Officially, he's there about Indian raids.
But the ladies think otherwise.
Oh, immediately. They figure he wouldn't bother coming all the way up there just for cattle if Nellie Bayard wasn't around. They see him as a potential suitor for Nellie. It's all about the matches, the money.
And Dr. Bayard sees this too, I assume.
You bet. He throws a dinner party specifically for Holmes, and Miss Forrest is there. And she sings.
Sing.
Beautifully, like a nightingale in the wilderness. It totally surprises people, reveals this cultured side. She studied music in New York, Munich, lived abroad.
So she's not just whatever they assumed.
Right. And she even makes a crack about the other ladies, saying they don't get along because she tends to say whatever's on her mind. Explains some of the friction, maybe.
How does Dr. Bayard treat her at this party?
He lays it on thick. Very gallant, compliments her looks, her dress, her singing. Then he starts fishing, pretending he knows her uncle back east. Mr. Cortlandt mentions his street, his club.
Trying to suss out her background, her connections?
Exactly, and she confirms it all, gives details. Bayard seems impressed. Thinks maybe she's okay as a friend for Eleanor, socially speaking. Still focused on status.
Okay, but then something else happens at this same party. Another incident.
Yes. While the party's going on, Mr. Holmes gets robbed. His cigar case and his pocketbook with over $100 vanish from his overcoat pocket in the hall.
From the hall, while everyone's inside.
Seems like it. And this is where it connects back to Miss Forrest, at least in one person's mind.
Who's that?
Mrs. Miller. She tells her husband, the major, that during the party, she saw Miss Forrest go out into the hall. Saw her standing by the hat rack where the coats were, looking like she was admiring Holmes's fur coat.
She saw her how?
In the reflection from a mirror, over the mantelpiece inside the room.
Circumstantial, but suspicious, given the timing.
Yeah.
What does Holmes do?
At first he tries to brush it off, like maybe he just misplaced the things. But later he's sure they were stolen. He even shows Major Miller how the hall door could be opened from outside, even though the servant thought it was locked.
Okay, so someone definitely could have slipped in and taken it.
Right. So now we have two thefts, strange activity, and both times there's this possible, if unproven, link to a woman. A McLean heard the swishing skirts. Mrs. Miller saw Miss Forrest near the coats. Suspicion is definitely brewing.
And while all this is going on, what about Mr. McLean, the young officer from the first incident?
Ah, McLean. He's got his own serious problems. The source reveals he's deeply depressed, weighed down by debt.
Debt. How much?
About $600, which was a lot for a lieutenant back then. And it wasn't his fault. Not really. Commissary stores were stolen by a sergeant who deserted, but McLean was the acting officer in charge, so he was held responsible.
Ouch. So he has to pay it back.
From his army pay, which takes over a year, leaves him basically broke, living on board wages, it says. Really puts a strain on junior officers.
And that affects his personal life, I imagine.
Hugely. He's fallen hard for Nellie Bayard. He thinks maybe she feels the same way. They enjoy spending time together. But with this debt hanging over him.
He feels he can't propose.
Exactly. He feels he has no right to ask anyone to marry him, especially someone like Nellie, with her social standing and, well, her father.
Ah, yes, Dr. Bayard. And then Holmes arrives.
The perfect rival. Wealthy, educated. And Dr. Bayard is all for it. He doesn't like McLean sniffing around Nellie anyway. He has other views for her, meaning someone rich.
That's
That
deadly.
just puts McLean in a terrible spot.
Does everyone at the Post know about this triangle?
Oh, yeah. Laramie's buzzing about it. People are talking, taking sides. Some say Nellie would be crazy not to take Holmes. His personal life is totally public.
Then things shift again, don't they? News from outside the Post.
Right. Routine gets broken. A courier arrives. There's been a fight with the Sioux. A lively one.
And McLean is involved.
He is. He gets wounded, shot, and otherwise hurt. But the report praises him, says he fought bravely, killed a warrior hand to hand, even though he was badly hurt and tried to hide it.
So he proves himself a good soldier despite his troubles.
Definitely. Dr. Bayard gets orders to send ambulances and either go himself or send his assistant, Dr. Weeks.
Does Holmes react to this news about McLean?
Interestingly, yes. He asks about McLean, learns about his bravery, and then he does something else. He seeks out the hospital attendant.
The attendant? Why?
The specific attendant who was on duty near McLean's room in Bedlam the night of the first incident when the swishing skirts were heard.
Ah. Does the attendant confirm McLean's story?
He does. He tells Holmes he heard a queer swishing sound from McLean's room, then sounds like drawers opening, saw someone leave stealthily and quickly onto the veranda, swishing the whole time.
And he mentions the dress sound again.
Yeah, he points out that the servants there don't wear dresses that swish like that. It wasn't a servant. Holmes is puzzled, tells the guy to keep quiet for now.
So independent confirmation. It wasn't just McLean. This swishing figure is real.
Absolutely critical. Makes it clear something very strange was going on in Bedlam.
But does this change Dr. Bayard's opinion of McLean, even after hearing about his bravery?
Not one bit. He's talking to Holmes and still running McLean down. Calls him a good deal of a boy, says he lacks experience, needs polish, talks about the debt, no money, no influence.
He's actively trying to poison the well for Holmes.
Clearly, it's not about McLean's character or service. It's purely about Bayard wanting Holmes for Eleanor.
And is Bayard himself escaping the gossip mill?
Not entirely.
Yeah.
While he's focused on McLean and Holmes, the garrison is noticing his behavior. Specifically, his frequent visits to Mrs. Forrest Fanny's sister-in-law.
They're suspicious about why he's there so often.
Yeah, Mrs. Post and others are skeptical that these visits are purely medical, requisite and necessary 3 or 4 times every 24 hours. Seems excessive.
Huh. So even the doctor isn't immune. Shows how closely everyone watches everyone else.
Exactly. No secrets are safe for long, or at least no actions go unnoticed or uncommented on.
So all these threads, the thefts, the mysterious woman, McLean's debt, Bayard's plotting, the gossip, they're starting to pull tighter now.
They really are. And Miss Forrest feels it most acutely. She's becoming more and more isolated.
The other women are shutting her out.
Completely. The source calls it an intangible but impenetrable barrier. Even her own sister-in-law, Mrs. Forrest, calls her a burden, says she quarreled with her family back east, implicitly her uncle, Mr. Cortlandt, that the ostracization is real.
Meanwhile, what's happening with McLean after being wounded?
His condition gets worse. Dr. Weeks, the assistant, tells Bayard that McLean became delirious, wild, especially the night after his roommate Hatton left on duty. Weeks ended up staying with him himself.
Delirious. And this is where Bayard makes that huge leap, right?
This is it. Bayard's talking with Major Miller about the thefts, suggesting it's someone inside the garrison. And then he drops the bombshell. He claims McLean's delirious talk sounded like confessions. Confessions that McLean himself was the thief.
What? Based on delirium?
Yes. Bayard asks Miller of whom could he have been talking about, but himself. It's just astounding. Major Miller is shocked, distressed.
It shows how much Bayard wants McLean gone. He's twisting a sick man's words to fit his own narrative.
Exactly. It's pure projection, driven by his dislike and his plans for Eleanor.
Does anyone else talk to McLean? Maybe get a different story.
Thankfully, yes. Mrs. Miller visits him. She's more sympathetic. She learns about the depth of his despair over the debt, how it's killing his hopes with Eleanor, about Bayard's opposition, his fear of Holmes' his arrival.
Does he tell her anything about the thefts?
He tells her something important. He says he became convinced he knew who the thief was way back on the night of the first incident, the night Major Miller came to get Hatton from their quarters.
But he won't say who.
No. He refuses to name names until Hatton gets back. Says they shook hands on keeping quiet about it. He's trying to protect someone based on what he believed then.
That promise to keep quiet seems like it's causing problems now.
Big problems.
Meh.
Because Hatton does visit McLean just before leaving on another expedition. McLean asks him directly about a handkerchief and about she, meaning Fanny Forrest.
And Hatton.
Hatton confirms McLean's suspicions. Says his own certainty about her is now far beyond suspicion. He tells McLean flat out that Miss Forrest was the one watching the night Miller came for him, that it was her dress, her steps McLean heard.
Wow. So Hatton believes she's the one.
Completely. He says she threw off all disguise after Miller left, flew downstairs, and begged Hatton not to go, not to tell, pleaded with him to save her from disgrace and ruin.
Why would she do that? Does Hatton have a theory?
He suspects kleptomania, says she seems otherwise sane, but has this compulsion.
And the handkerchief, what was that about?
Right, McLean mentions finding something with his handkerchiefs and one that had gone missing but then reappeared. It was a card, and it puzzled him.
A card.
Yeah. And Hatton admits he gave the card to Miss Forrest, and she asked him to put it among McLean's things.
Okay, that sounds very suspicious. Linking her directly to McLean's room again.
It looks bad. And Mrs. Miller gets wind of this Hatton's confirmation, the card story. Added to what she already saw at the hat rack, she's now convinced Miss Forrest is the thief, probably afflicted with kleptomania.
What does she do with this information?
She pushes Major Miller to act. She wants it handled quietly, get Captain Forrest to take his much-afflicted sister away, make restitution, avoid a scandal.
So they decide to confront someone.
They decide to confront McLean. Major Miller gathers a group himself, Mrs. Miller, Dr. Bayard, the adjutant, and they go to McLean's room, where he's still wounded and vulnerable.
And Bayard goes along expecting.
Bayard goes expecting to finally nail McLean, to hear the proof, maybe force him to resign, clear the way for Holmes and Eleanor.
But that's not what happens.
Not at all. To Bayard's horror-stricken ears, as the text says, the evidence presented points squarely at Miss Forrest. The woman he found intriguing, the one he'd considered suitable for Eleanor's company, he's left completely stunned, semi-dazed.
His whole theory, his whole plan just collapses. Serves him right, maybe.
It's definitely a moment where his bias and manipulation come crashing down. But the focus is now heavily on Miss Forrest.
It seems like the case is closed, pointing at her. But there's another twist, isn't there? The real thief.
There is, and it comes from an unexpected direction. Fanny Forrest herself mentions that her valuable diamonds were stolen.
Diamonds? When did this happen?
Sometime earlier, apparently. A gift from her uncle Cortland, taken from a locked case inside her trunk, which was opened using false keys.
Who did she suspect?
Her maid, Celestine, and the maid's soldier friend.
Ah, the soldier friend. Does he have a name?
Yes, he's finally introduced as Parsons. He's described as a former barber, knows horses, rides well. Interestingly, Major Miller had actually chosen him for a risky dispatch mission to Fort Fetterman.
And someone noticed him acting weirdly.
Mr. Holmes did. Quiet Mr. Holmes saw Parsons lurking around late one night after Holmes himself had been talking with Miss Forrest.
So Holmes is putting pieces together.
Seems like it. And the whole thing breaks open when Parsons is caught. Not at Laramie, but way down in Denver.
And he confesses.
He does, confesses to everything. Stealing Miss Forrest's diamonds, Mr. Holmes's things, including amethysts, which weren't mentioned before, and pins belonging to both Holmes and Hatton.
So he was the thief all along, not Miss Forrest.
He was the thief. Celestine, the maid, fed him information about who had what and when people would be out. Parsons did the stealing and hiding, though he gambled most of the money away.
Why did he run?
He got spooked. Thought Dr. Bayard had recognized him somehow, felt the news tightening. That dangerous dispatch mission gave him the perfect excuse to bolt. He grabbed the diamonds and headed for Denver.
But Holmes tracked him.
Holmes tracked him, gathered the evidence. Turns out Holmes was doing some quiet detective work all along.
So that clears Miss Forrest of the thefts. What about all the suspicion around her, the swishing skirts being near the hat rack?
Well, Parsons' confession proves she didn't steal those items. But it doesn't explain her actions that night in Bedlam, or why she was by the hat rack. Those remain. Ambiguous, maybe driven by her own reasons or anxieties, but not theft in these cases. The damage to her reputation from the gossip, however, that's likely done.
And what about that mysterious card in McLean's handkerchief, the one Hatton gave her to put there?
Ah, yes. Holmes clears that up, too. He tells McLean Holmes, was the one who arranged for the card to be put there.
Holmes was? Why?
It had nothing to do with the thefts or Miss Forrest's supposed guilt. It was Holmes trying to be discreetly kind. He sensed McLean was hard-pressed financially. The debt in the card was meant as a quiet offer of help, of support.
Wow, so McLean completely misunderstood it. He thought it was some kind of clue related to the thief.
Exactly. He was so puzzled by it, he just burned it. But it was a friendly gesture from his supposed rival, completely misinterpreted in that atmosphere of suspicion. Shows how wires got crossed.
A major misunderstanding fueling the whole mess. Okay, so the real thief is caught, McLean is cleared, the card is explained. What about the romance? Does Bayard give in?
Not willingly. He gets moody after Parsons is caught, maybe embarrassed about being wrong, maybe, as the gossip suggested, Miss Forrest rejected some advance. He doubles down on his anger towards Eleanor.
Still blaming her attachment to McLean.
Totally. Calls it the only thing making him wretched, says it's absurd because McLean has no money or influence. He's learned nothing, basically. Still obsessed with status.
Poor Eleanor. How does she handle it?
She's distressed, gets pale, tearful under his pressure, but she doesn't give up on McLean. She stays loving towards her father, but firm in her feelings.
So what breaks the deadlock?
Grandparents to the rescue. Eleanor must have written to them. They take her side completely, happy about McLean. The grandfather writes a blistering letter to Bayard.
What does it say?
Says he approves of McLean, knew the stock well, calls him steadfast, loyal, and honest, and crucially tells Bayard that Eleanor's future, her money, it's his concern, not Bayard's, and McLean's finances don't matter. Pulls the rug right out from under Bayard.
Huh. Can't argue with the man controlling the purse strings.
Exactly. Cornered by the grandparents, faced with Eleanor's obvious distress, Bayard finally, grudgingly yields. He has to admit McLean is a gentleman, a good officer, no vices, and hey, he's debt-free now anyway because the government replaced the stolen stores.
Still sounds bitter about it, though.
Oh, completely. Grumbling that Eleanor chose a mere army lieutenant just like her mother chose him years ago, the irony is probably lost on him.
Yeah.
But he gives permission for McLean to formally court Eleanor.
So love wins out in the end despite the doctor's best efforts.
It does, thanks to Eleanor's quiet strength and her grandparents' intervention, really. It bypasses the Garrison drama almost entirely.
Looking back on all this, it's quite a story packed into these excerpts, more than just a whodunit.
Absolutely. It's a real snapshot of life in that confined world. How personal issues, debts, ambitions all play out against a backdrop of military life and, well, constant observation by neighbors.
And the danger of gossip. Jumping to conclusions. Miss Forrest was convicted in the court of public opinion long before Parsons confessed.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Based on appearance, coincidence, misinterpreted actions, and Mrs. Miller's certainty, Bayard's biased interpretation of delirium, it shows how easily suspicion can snowball when facts are scarce or ignored.
And Holmes, the outsider, ends up being the one to quietly figure things out. While McLean and Hatton's attempt to protect Miss Forrest by staying silent actually backfired, allowing suspicion to fall on McLean.
Right, the cost of silence versus the danger of speaking too soon or based on bad information. It's complex.
And Bayard himself, his focus on status, his willingness to believe the worst of McLean, his ultimate defeat by the very family connections he relies on. Quite the character study.
It really is. It shows how self-interest can blind people.
So wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway here?
I think it's about how fragile truth and reputation are in a closed community. How easily misunderstanding and suspicion can take root and spread, especially when people have hidden motives or incomplete information.
Yeah, it really makes you think. In that kind of environment, the frontier fort, where everyone knows everyone's business, how does trust survive? How do you separate rumor from reality when suspicion is everywhere?
And what happens after? Even when someone like Fanny Forrest is technically cleared of the specific thefts, what about the label, the Queen of Bedlam nickname, the lingering shadow of kleptomania? Does that ever really go away in people's minds?
Something to definitely ponder. How much damage is done even when the truth eventually comes out?